I would say a majority of the time in dating, you either get wow on both sides. That's easy. That's a yes. Ugh, at least on one side or both sides, which is an easy no. But a majority of the time, it's actually like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe. I mean, and a lot of people have the logic. If it's not a yes, it must not be for me, right? I would know. It would be obvious to me. And my answer is no, it's not obvious. What do you know them for 2 hours and now you got to dump them?
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have the fabulous Aliza Ben Shalom, who is joining us from quite far, right? All the way from Israel, Aliza?
Yes.
Yes, all the way from Israel. And Aliza is a renowned matchmaker. She has helped hundreds of people get to their chuppah. And most importantly, she's famous for really making the concept of Jewish matchmaking known to millions of people through her role on Netflix Jewish Matchmaker. Thank you so much for joining us, Aliza.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's start off. How did you get into this whole matchmaking field?
I think, first of all, I think it's a calling. When you want to do matchmaking, there's something inside of you that is drawing you to bring people together. And it's
Mhm.
not even like, do you want to do this? It's just you're called to do it. So I do remember being very young. I grew up more secular. I became observant later in life. And so I remember even, at a camp dance trying to set my brother up with one of my girlfriends. I remember in high school setting up some friends and just kind of like seeing what was happening. But I didn't really know that matchmaking was like a thing you could do in life. And it's not like something you get a degree in, it's not something you go to school for. So it didn't occur to me that this would be anything that I would do. And it wasn't till my mid 20s after I got married and I had a couple kids, I started working as a volunteer matchmaker online. And I was like, oh, this is good. And from that, I started to coach and mentor. I started to train matchmakers and coaches, and it evolved into my passion, which evolved into a full-time business.
Wow, that's incredible. So, can anyone be a matchmaker?
Yes. And
Yes.
I think that you don't have to be a matchmaker. Anyone can make a match, right?
Ah,
So
okay.
if you don't want the pressure of the title of like matchmaker, which feels a little bit heavy, like I am responsible for finding you, you're human in the
Mm.
world. It's my job,
Right,
right? It's
exactly.
like,
Sounds
whoa.
formidable. Yeah,
It's right,
sure.
right. It's a little overwhelming. So, I think that it's better to just know, like, anybody can make a match. You don't have to be a matchmaker, but anyone can make a match. Make a suggestion, see if you get a yes. If you get a yes from one side and a yes from the other side, boom, you've made a match. Let's
Made a
pray
match.
for the best.
Right. That makes it much easier, right? That
Exactly.
brings it really down to earth. So, I mean, a lot of people I'm sure are listening to this and thinking, what is the whole concept of a matchmaker? Like in modern days, do we need a matchmaker? What is a matchmaker? And I'm sure you've had this on Netflix. Like you really, really taught millions and millions of people the whole concept of a Jewish matchmaker. So tell us, what is a Jewish matchmaker? Like, what is it all about? And why do people need a matchmaker today?
I think that we've always needed a matchmaker. And again, it could be somebody that's just informally bringing two people together. It could even be a
Mhm.
family member that meets somebody and knows a friend of a friend and sticks people together. Again, whether you do it professionally or as a hobby or just because you thought of something, you
Mhm.
are a matchmaker.
Mhm.
So, a Jewish matchmaker is somebody who is invested in bringing couples together and invested in the future of the Jewish people, right? The only way that we're going to have a future is if we continue to build healthy, happy marriages and help to continue on for generations to come. So, I think that the concept is to always have an eye out for somebody else, right? We're not just
Mhm.
here to serve ourselves. We want to find our own match. And in addition to doing that, we want to help other people to find healthy and happy relationships, to find loving relationships. And by building up couples, we build up a whole community. And that's something that's extremely valuable.
100%. Were you met I mean, you said you came from a secular background. I'm just curious how you met your husband. Did you meet through a matchmaker or some other way? Or how did you get to Judaism?
So, oh, 2 different questions.
Yeah.
So I always loved my Judaism, but we weren't practicing, right? So like we
Mhm.
didn't observe Shabbat. We didn't, at a certain point, we started to keep kosher. Like there were certain things that we learned and we did, and certain things that we didn't know about as much. And in my mid 20s, I went on like a Jewish retreat, a Shabbaton, a weekend. And I started to just learn about Judaism and different things. And I was like, I just like this stuff. I've always liked my
Mm.
Judaism. I've always done stuff and I always knew about it. Like I grew up conservative Jewish, not politically, but
Mhm.
Jewishly, like in the conservative movement. And it was like, we know about these things, but like we don't necessarily do them. Like other Orthodox
Right.
people do that, not us.
Right. Of
And
course.
and then I learned and I was like, well, but I like it. Like I like Shabbat and I enjoy the holidays and like I just want to do them. And as soon as you start doing those things consistently and regularly, it's like, are you Orthodox? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just
Right.
practicing. Like I'm just Jewish and
Right.
I'm doing Jewish stuff. Isn't that normal?
Right.
So that's how I came to my Judaism. The second part of the question was, what did you say?
How you met your husband?
Oh, how I met my
Did
husband.
if you met him through a matchmaker?
Okay, so I went to a Jewish singles retreat and it was this holiday weekend and I just fell in love. I was so happy with Judaism, right? Like I really
Mm.
reconnected with my roots. And on that retreat, I was from Philadelphia. There were about 4 or 5 people from Philadelphia and when we came back to Philly, we started to get together. We would see each other for Purim, we got together for Shabbat, and my husband was one of those people in that group that at the time we didn't know each other. We became friends in this whole group, not friends, as friendly as you can be in more observant circles. And um and I don't know, after sitting across the table from Shabbat, something happened and it was like, do you want to go out? And I was like, yeah, yeah. So we met organically at a retreat. We started to date. And then after our first date, he was like, so you should call the rabbi. And I was like,
Mm,
rabbi? I don't want to call a rabbi. He's like, well, like it was not just his rabbi, but it was really his best friend as well, who acted as our matchmaker. So even though we met
mm.
kind of organically, he brought him in as our matchmaker. And the rabbi's like, okay, so, you know, like he had to learn about me. He had to see where I was at. My husband had, started on his Jewish journey a little before mine.
Mm.
He was moving at a nice consistent pace and I was kind of moving at a marathon pace and running through it and catching up. And we had to have the discussion of like where he's at, where I'm at, what we want out of life, what we value, where we're in alignment, where we're not. And it was pretty quickly apparent that we were very much on the same page and heading in a similar direction. And it was very helpful to have this rabbi who acted as our shadchan. And even though he didn't make the match to put us together, he was the support network and the matchmaker that got us to the chuppah and got us to the finish line of getting down the aisle and getting married.
Wow, wow. You say you were on a marathon on Judaism. It sounds like you have a marathon in life in general.
It's true.
That's the energy I'm getting for you,
Yes,
like,
it's true.
and you just, like, went straight to stardom on Netflix and just taught everybody, like, millions of people about Judaism through the Netflix, which brings me to the next question, like, what did you wanna accomplish on Netflix to the community to teach people about Jewish matchmaking? What would you like people to know about what principles or ideas Judaism has in matchmaking that are helpful?
So, my goal is to take very deep Jewish concepts and make them very simple, very easy for
Mhm.
anybody to connect to and for anybody to understand, and not for it to feel very foreign. So, I have a concept um, that is called date 'em till you hate 'em. Now, in
I saw
Judaism,
that, yes.
we don't believe in hate. It is not our thing. Love your neighbor as yourself. We're all about love. But date 'em till you hate 'em really says, like, give somebody a chance. Keep going out. Don't just dump them right away. In the swipe culture, next, next, next. No, no, no,
Mm,
no, no.
mm,
You don't even know them, right? If
mm,
you, and quote, to hate somebody, you'd have to really get to know them very well to
mm.
really dislike them that much, which means open up, take time, pause, go through the process. If it's not going to work, fine, you don't have to marry them, but you don't know what's going to be, and maybe you should try dating for a little bit longer. So,
Mm.
so again, it takes it in very deep wisdom, but it puts it in something that's very palatable, a little bit playful, and definitely memorable. That was one of
Definitely,
the
yeah.
concepts.
Right.
Another
I'm
thing that
sure
yes,
no,
sorry.
I'm sure there you had pushback to that, like, "What do you mean? Could just keep dating them?" Like, should
Right.
I let's say I see in the first time that it's just not for me, should I continue dating that person?
Right. So I always say if it's a hard no, if it's I will never marry you, you are not my person. You could say no after one, but I would say
But on the other hand,
maybe
never say never, you never know, like,
no, no,
sometimes, right?
no.
You know.
Okay, like let's call it 10 or 15% of the time it's a hard no. You're a great
Right,
human, you're a good person, but you're not good for me. That's what we're trying to discern. Are you good for
right.
me? Not just are you good. There's a lot of good people in the world, but are you good for me? So that's the first thing. I would say a majority of the time in dating, you either get wow on both sides. That's easy, that's a yes. Ugh, at least on one side or both sides, which is an easy no. But a majority of the time, it's actually like, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Mm,
Maybe. I mean, and a lot of people have the logic. If it's not a yes, it must not be for me, right? I would
mhm,
know. It would be
mhm,
obvious to me.
mhm,
And my answer is
mhm,
no, it's not obvious.
mhm.
Give it, what do you know them for 2 hours and now you got to dump
Exactly.
them? You only know them
Right.
2 hours. Date them till you hate them. 5 hours, 10 hours, put some time and make sure they're really not your human. But if you look at them, and not that you hate them, but that you look at them and say, it's not for me, or here's what's not for me. Like
Mm,
it could be something internal, it could be something external, it could be a combination of things, it could be who they are, what they value, where things aren't in alignment. It's okay to say no, but I like to say know
right,
what you're saying no to. That's important. So
right.
that's my know what you're saying no to is more cleverly put as date them till you hate them. So
Right.
that was
No,
one
it's so
concept.
true. I know my son-in-law once told me, like, he was very wise. He was saying he tells people that, in your first date, you might not like her nose, keep on dating, and if you see, like, after date number 4 or 5, the nose got smaller, then that's how you know, like, it doesn't matter to you anymore,
Right.
right?
Right, when it's not so
Right.
noticeable and when it fades away and you're like, "Oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was."
Ex
I have had
exactly.
people say to me, "No, I don't wanna keep going out because I don't want to come to like them and I know I will." I'm
Uh-huh.
like, "Ah, you see? You know your brain isn't seeing reality at first glance. It takes a little bit of time until the judgment balances out." And so we just wanna make sure that you're very clear about what really works for you or really
So
doesn't.
is that should you keep dating if you don't wanna get to like them, but you know you will? Does that mean that that's your match?
It means that it's worth pursuing, even if it's gonna
Right,
bother you, but it means that it's worth
right.
looking into because you actually know there's something deeper there, even though there is something that is really bothering you, and you have to give it time to decide.
Mm,
That would be my advice.
right,
The
right.
and that leads into another concept that I spoke about on Jewish matchmaking, which is hishtadlut or hishtadlus, which is effort. Like what
Mhm,
do I have to do to put in? Like Aliza, do I really have to go out so many times? Do I really have to date him till I hate him? I could just, when I know, I'll know. I don't have to put in so much effort. It'll just come to me when the time is right, when everything's ready. And life doesn't really work that way, right? We have to put in our effort, and with our effort comes the reward of whatever it is. It could be our
mhm,
person for a job. What are you going to do? You're going to sit back and go, well, when I get a job, I get a job. No, you're going to put resumes out there. You're going to do job interviews. You're going to network and talk to people. You're going to make an effort. So, in the same way with dating, we have to make an effort. And the question is, what is my effort? What do I
mm,
need to do? How much do I need to push or try or move through this? And how long does it take me to do it? So I think that everybody needs to analyze what's going to work for them, right? Do you need to date online? Should you be dating in person? Do you need a matchmaker? Do you want to talk to a whole bunch of friends? Should you go to some events? Should you do some networking? Like, what is the way that you can gracefully move through the dating and relationship process? And what can you handle? I like to tell people, do the easiest thing first. So if you love in-person events and that makes you happy, do in person. If you hate
mhm.
in-person events, do that last. It's okay.
Right.
You could do online, you could do it through other people. Like there's many, many ways to meet. I know, like, back in the day, in the olden days, people met through personal ads. They just put
Mm.
something online. Here's who I am, single Jewish woman seeking a nice Jewish boy for
Right.
love, marriage, and family, must live in New York, that was it. People
That was
replied, you
it, right,
filtered through and you found your person.
right.
So that was
Wow,
another thing that we talked about, as in terms of like Jewish concepts. Can I tell you
right.
one more?
Absolutely, sure, we love the Jewish concepts, 'cause so
So
I guess a lot of these concepts are so novel to people because in today's society, it's kind of like you say, the swipe culture, just swipe it and go on to the next one, and,
yeah,
I'm not ready to put in that effort and to really try, so
right,
that's refreshing.
right,
What was the
exactly.
next one?
Okay, my next one is one of my favorites, and everybody loves to hate this one. I call it the 5-date challenge. There's a couple different parts to it, but my favorite part is if you truly want clarity, do not touch. No physical touching,
Mhm,
no handshake, no pat on the back, no hug hello, no kiss on the cheek, no anything. Touch hearts before you touch other parts. That's the basic thing.
mm,
But 5-date challenge, no touching for 5 dates. What happens on the 6th date? Take it slow. In Judaism, we have a concept of dating with shomer negia, which means guarding our touch and not touching even until you get married. So you would date the entire time and then get married and then introduce physical touch. So I don't think that that's relevant for the entire world if you can't wrap your head around it. Some people are like, well, forget it. I can't do that. So if I can't do all of it,
mm,
I'll do none of it. And they throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I say, no,
mm,
let's take the concept and let's make it into something that somebody could try.
mm,
Some people I've said they're like 5 dates. And I was like, yeah. But they said, why? I said, because I
right,
guarantee if you get to a date number 6 and both people agree to go on a date 6 and nobody has touched, you actually like the inside and the outside. And then I
mm,
know we have a really good foundation. Otherwise, you could start dating. Physical touch comes in relationships very early modern day. And by 6 months, I have people tell me, I don't know if I really like them. And I'm like, you've been dating for
mm,
6 months. I've had people come to me after 2 years. I'm not sure if they're the one. You've been with them for 2 years. You're practically married. What do you mean you don't know? How do you not
yeah,
know? You've spent all your time. Well, I'm not sure. Well, what are you not sure about? Because obviously you've introduced physical touch. Great. So that's out of the way. So you don't know if you like the inside of the human? That's the first thing we need to evaluate. Then we can deal with everything else. If we don't like the inside, the outside's completely irrelevant. How you make me physically feel, we don't care. If I don't like you
mm,
as a human being and I don't think I want to spend my life with you, or at least a portion of it, like at least getting
right.
into a serious relationship, not, everything else is really useless. And it's crystal clear. You cannot make it to a date 6 unless both parties actually like each other. And there's no question. You
So
don't you don't need therapy, you don't need a coach, and you don't need a matchmaker to give you an answer. You just know if you get there, it's because you both like each other.
wow. So you're saying that if someone has touch, if someone does touch, then they're just so confused because of the touch that they're focusing just on the touch and not on the actual person, and that's why someone after 2 years will say to you, "I'm not sure I like the person," because they're not really
Enough.
getting to know the person
Yeah, like
enough.
I don't know that I like them enough, or I don't know that we're compatible enough because their vision is cloudy. It's not
Mm,
because they're only focusing on physical touch, it's because they're trying to integrate physical touch and the emotional and the internal and the value system. And it's like, well, I like this, but I don't like that, but this is okay, but maybe this is good enough to compensate. They're almost like weighing on a scale
mm,
and trying to compensate. And sometimes physical touch can be very enticing. So if that is very good, but the inside isn't great, they're like, well, I guess you have to compromise somewhere. And then they're willing
mm,
to compromise on the inside of the human being, which does not get shine like baseline. If they're starting down here, we're not going way up over time, like
right,
it, it, it,
right.
it slips over time a little bit. So you have to start baseline with a really high quality human because good people get better. People that you don't love so much and that you're not a fan of, they don't get better over time because they didn't even start out good for you.
Mm, interesting, wow. So when you make these matches for people, like when you try to match up people, what are you looking for? What are you looking for in in compatibility? Are you making matches of people that are compatible, introvert with introvert, extrovert with extrovert, like what are things that you do look for? Are you making opposites attract, or are you bringing together people that are very similar?
I love that question. So
Yeah.
I think that opposites might attract, but compatibility stays together much easier. And I think that you have an easier life when you have somebody that you're more compatible with. I
Mm,
think men and women have enough differences between them. Like, you don't have to look for more differences. Don't worry. You're going to be opposite in a lot of ways. Like, we don't
right.
need opposite on top of opposite. So, in terms of what we're looking for, I like that the qualities are aligned. And under the category of qualities would be what you value, what you want in life, that those things are aligned, and also personality. So, in terms of introvert, extrovert, those types of things can create balance. You don't have to have the same,
Mhm,
but if you have somebody that loves to be in the public eye and somebody would rather read a book and stay home, they're going to have a hard time integrating with the world. They might have a nice
mhm,
home life, but going out there and doing things is not going to be so wonderful. So as long as the extrovert doesn't need somebody on their arm and going with them, and they don't, and the other person doesn't mind to be alone, you could make it work, but it's not as easy.
mhm.
Even you want to have guests in the home, but the other person wants to have like one guest and the other one wants to have five
Right.
guests or a party of 100. And there's just incompatibility in how people like to spend their free time, their holiday time, their family time. So I think that we need it's not never a perfect match, but you need people that are
Mhm,
in similar spaces, in terms of values and in terms of personality. Those are the first two things. If your values and your personalities are not aligned to a high degree, nothing else actually matters. Like the core, the essence of who you are and who you want to be and the life you want to live, those things aren't aligned. I kind of don't care about anything else. So
right.
that to me is step one. And then
So
step
what kind of values? Like, give me examples of what kind of values you'd look for.
Everybody has their own list. So some people, and depending on what they grew up with, right? Like if somebody had major trust issues growing up, having somebody that's really trustworthy and loyal and
Mhm,
committed and dedicated, that might be really important to them. Or somebody who, the opposite, grew up with a trustworthy, loyal, reliable family, needs that consistency. Some people are looking for financial stability, emotional compatibility and stability. Different people, I'm trying to think of all the lists that I've gone through that everybody has made. Somebody who's loving or generous, giving of their time or finances. People who, they say have a good heart or a good eye, somebody
mm,
who judges with the benefit of the doubt or is uplifting and really builds people up.
mm.
These are the
These are the
types.
qualities.
Yeah. I
Right,
mean, and again, everybody has a list.
right.
Um, the other thing in another category is relationship fears. And people come in with a lot of relationship fears. So you might have a fear of abandonment, abuse, addiction. You might have a fear of failure, divorce. You might have a fear of too much friction and fighting in the relationship, right? Kind of whatever has happened to us in the past, we usually have a slight fear in the future that might be what happens to us. And what we want to make sure is whatever our fear is, you could work on that. You can do therapy, whatever, fine. However, who you are today. And I work with who people are today and say, you have a fear. We want to make sure your partner triggers it to a low or
Mhm,
moderate degree and
mhm,
not to a high degree. Because
mhm,
we're never going to get something that's not with any friction at all. We just need it to
mhm,
be, I don't like it, but I could manage it. I could tolerate
mhm.
it. I could learn how to live with that. Not my favorite thing about you. It's definitely not why I'm marrying you, but you don't make me crazy every day and I don't want to divorce you. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid.
Right. Even though sometimes the things that really attract us to our spouse, we can't
Yes.
stand later on,
Yes.
like the spontaneousness might be irresponsibility later on, right?
Exactly.
Or the
That's
generosity
funny.
might be, like, so careless with spending, right?
Hmm.
So So
Yes.
how do you avoid that, or do you not avoid
No,
that?
you don't avoid that. I
No,
just tell
no,
people, they're
okay.
like, "Oh my gosh, I love that he's so generous." And I'm like, "Right, you
Right,
realize that he might be so generous with also contributions, giving, other things, and you're like, 'Wait, we
right,
need for us,' and you might be out of balance." So
right,
I just not that I warn them, but I give them a heads up. This happens. What you love, you may also hate. That's called normal.
right. No, no.
There's a third category. So we've got the values, qualities, values. We've got fears, and the third category is bothers. Modern day, what we would call like the ick, like what I
Mhm,
really don't like about you. It could
mhm,
be anything. It might be a physical trait. It might be a behavior. It could be how they treat somebody, or that they're always on their phone and playing with it while they're having a conversation with you. And so we're always looking for somebody, like people have things that bother them about their spouse. Always.
mhm,
Oh, if you don't have
mhm.
them, you're living in la la land. You're totally
Right.
not in reality. You're in lust. You're not in love. So you need to
Right.
find at least 3 to 5 things that bother you about this other person. And again, same like fears, it should trigger you to a low or a manageable level, but not to a high degree all the time. Because a high degree, again, it just leads to a potential deal breaker, which means if we would get married, we might get divorced because that bothers me so much. So it can't
Mm,
be a consistent trigger at such a high level. It's just kind of one of those like that little white noise in the background that's just like
mhm.
annoying, but it's just there, but you just figure it out and like
You
it
just
just kind of.
ignore it after some time, right.
Yeah, and even if you like you ignore it with consciousness, like
Mhm.
that's the thing I don't love about you, and I'm gonna focus on the things I do love about you because where I put my effort and my focus, things grow, right? So if I focus on this
Right.
plant and I water it and I nurture it and I give it enough sun, it's gonna grow, right? But if I focus on something and bad in the wrong way, it's gonna like make it worse.
Mm,
I'm gonna just hyper
mhm,
focus on something wrong, and I'm gonna grow that wrong thing. And we don't want this bad trait to grow on us and to irritate us to a high degree. So we know it's there. We accept the fact that it exists. You have to accept it. Don't pretend
mhm.
like it doesn't. It does exist. It's not my favorite. I'll love you anyway. That's kind of how it
Right.
goes.
So are these, like, lists that people make before you match them up? Or are they lists that
I
they
like
make
to.
while
Yeah.
they're
Well,
before?
so the first two, the qualities and the fears you make before, and then once you're in
Mhm,
the relationship, then you can evaluate the bothers and the ick and the things that are specifically about this person that are like, yeah, it's not my
mm,
favorite trait.
mhm, mhm. And
And
and as a matchmaker or coach, you're constantly coaching them through the dating process?
yes, yes. So
Yes.
to me, matchmaking has 3 components. You have to make the match, make the introduction, and stick 2 people together. You need to do the coaching and mentorship and support them, walk the walk, talk the talk. How did it go? What's happening? And evaluate. And then you have to have somebody who's a closer. Like you're getting married or you're
Mhm,
breaking up. Like this, I've helped people to break up, and they're not always happy with me. And I tell them, listen, you don't have the skills or the compatibility or anything to make it last. You have a relationship that is up, down, up, down, up, down. It's like fire
mhm.
and, oil and water. It doesn't mix. This is not compatible. And even you might even like each other. You might love each other. If you date long enough, you might develop love and feelings for each other. But love doesn't matter if you don't know how to live together.
Oh,
So
that's fascinating. So how does a person know if they're not compatible? Like, what would be the sign?
Usually there are moderate to high levels of disagreements consistently. There are a lot of incompatibilities. There's a lot of friction in the relationship. Um, it's kind of like, I like you, you're a good human, you're just not a good human for me. Like I wish this worked out better. Like I wish we didn't just like each other. I wish we worked together. Right? Like so,
Mm,
again, like we might be drawn, how you're drawn sometimes to something and you're like, "Oh, that's not good for me." Like, if you're on a
mhm.
diet and you're like, "I want to eat the cookie," right? Cookie. And you're like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but that's not good for me. It's not good
Right,
for what I want for my body right now. I'm trying to do a
right,
detox and that's not
right,
compatible. But sometimes we're drawn to people where you're like, "Oh, this is oh, really? Are you sure it's not going to work? Because I
right.
really want it to. Are you sure?" You're like, "Well, it's kind of volatile. You kind of just disagree all the time and you put each other down." And they're like, "But I love them also. We have good times too." And I'm like, "Right, but 50% good times and 50% not is not enough of a ratio. Like we've
Wow.
got to be over 70% with good times. And the other part can't be so low. It just has to be like kind of like a mosquito bite. versus a snake bite, right? Like a mosquito bite, it itches, it bothers you, it's annoying. A snake bite could kill you. It's a problem,
Right.
right? So like you could handle a mosquito bite in a relationship, but you can't handle a snake bite. You don't want those people. That bite is too hard.
Hmm. Right, interesting. I remember when I was going out with my husband, I did not wanna say yes, even though he was ready, like, so quickly, until we actually had a fight. Like, I wanted to see
Yes.
a fight.
Yes. You're right.
Yeah.
You can tell them you're right. Yeah, you should.
So we fought about whether we should get engaged. He was like, "Yes." I was like, "Wait."
So, John and Julie Gottman, who have the Love Lab and talk all about love, dating, and relationships, have done studies on this. And they say that 69% of all problems that a couple has cannot be solved. You cannot solve
Mm,
69% of problems, which means you can only solve 31% of problems. That means
wow.
69% of the time, you just have to learn how to manage it, cope with it, deal with
Mm,
it, get around it. Even like you said, sometimes you have to forget it and sometimes you have to know how to overcome what's going on because you can't fix it. You can only put a band-aid on it. And you
mm,
think I can solve this, but it's really not solvable. You just have to learn how to live with it for a lifetime. So and couples need to learn how to fight for the right things and how to fight fair and
mm,
how to manage themselves for what they really want. Like, is this really worth it? Do we always have this
mm,
thing, that thing that you have with your partner for the first, 2 months, 3 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, seven? You're like, it's not going away. Okay, it's never going to go away. Oh, that's in the 69% of things I can't solve.
solve, right.
Okay, so how do I deal with it? If I can't solve it, how do I manage it? Because you chose this person and you are going to live together and you can work through it. You just can't fix it. And that's okay.
Wow,
It
right.
takes a lot of
Wow.
pressure off when you look at certain things and you're like, wait, it's not going to get better than this. And you're like, no, it's not getting better. And you're like, oh, okay.
Right, that's true, you're right, it does take pressure, like, because 'cause you're always trying to fix things to be better,
Fix,
but if you
fix,
can
fix.
just learn to live with that and say, "This is how it is." Wow.
Yeah.
But are there any, like, red flags that are, "I gotta stay away from this?" Like, are there signs when you're dating that this is a red flag and this is something that is not good?
Usually people have this gut instinct or something that happens when it's a red flag and then they try to ignore it. So I
Mm,
had a client once and on the weekends her boyfriend would have a few drinks and then sometimes on a Tuesday he would also have a few drinks and a Wednesday and a Thursday and she's like, "No, he just likes to loosen up after work. It's
mm,
okay." I said, "You want to loosen up after work and you want to have a glass of wine, okay, but like 3 shots later and doing that 5 times a week, we're borderline on having a problem with
right,
alcohol. This is not
sure.
actually normal." And she's like, "Well, he said it's not a problem." And I was like,
Uh,
"Well," you're like, I don't
mm,
really care about
right.
his analysis. He's not the right one to manage this. And you'd think it would be obvious, but somehow you get into something and we're always blinded by it. Oh,
Mm,
I can't get together. You're like, okay, maybe we'll get
mm,
together another day. Yeah, yeah, we'll do another day. Oh, I'm running late. Oh, I'm sorry, I had to cancel. All of a sudden they've canceled, they've been late, they haven't made you a priority. It's happened 3 times. First it was work, and then it was their mother, and then their best friend was in the hospital and they always have an excuse and there's always something that's more important than what's going on in your relationship. Guess what? That's actually a red flag. And I
mm,
understand people have things, but not consistently, date after date and week after week, where you're seeing a pattern. As soon as you start to see a pattern, then you
mm.
should ask yourself, is it a good pattern or a bad pattern? And is this potentially a red flag? Because patterns are habits and things that build, and it's something that you'll always see in your relationship, and it's probably an indication that there's something wrong.
Interesting, wow. And how do you know when it's just a fear of commitment? Like, I'm just afraid to get engaged, I'm just afraid to get married, a general fear versus something it's an actual red flag.
So, usually, people with general fears have a history of something. They had a broken engagement, their parents got divorced, they never saw happy, healthy marriages. They, somebody broke up with them, cheated on them, broke their heart, something, and so now it caused that to happen. It doesn't usually come from nowhere. There's
Mm,
usually some sort of a past trigger that brings it into the present that's like a living trauma from the past that turns into a fear. Um, like by me, I try to ask people about their history just to know about them so I know what the baseline is. And if I see that, a fear of commitment is there, I'll either ask them to stop dating, like have some time to think about this, see if this is something that you can work through, or if they are
mm,
dating, to own up to it and to say it doesn't have to do with them. I've got something going on. I have, and they're not going to convince you like, I'm so amazing. So now you're going to get over your fear and pick me. It doesn't usually work that way. It's kind of like a
mm,
consciousness about what is going on for them. And then once they verbalize it, like, my parents got divorced, all my friends, family. I've seen I had one woman. She said, "Eliza," I asked her, "How many healthy relationships do you know? Like, who do you know who's married?" And she thought, and she's like, "Well, there's one couple in my community." And I was like, "No, no,
mm,
who else is married that you know?" And she goes, "Nobody. Not my parents, not my aunts, not my uncles. No, they're all divorced. Everybody's divorced or they never got married. I don't have any healthy role models." So, yeah, it's clear that she would have a fear of commitment. Like, of course you would have that. And
right.
and she has nothing to model it after. So,
Mm,
if somebody is not committing, they'll give you reasons. Well, I'm not sure if you're the one. I'm not sure if this
mm,
is right. It could be. That also could be the case
mhm,
that there's just doubt around the relationship and they don't know if there's enough alignment. And either more
mhm.
time helps that, or talking with somebody, getting mentorship, coaching, support is something that could really help with that.
Wow, that's interesting. Why do you think so few people are getting married nowadays? I mean, the statistics are pretty dismal for marriages. Why is that? And what do you think in your Jewish matchmaking concepts could alleviate that problem?
So I think that long-term marriages, happy, healthy marriages are becoming extinct. I saw a study recently that said that only 2% of couples make it over 60 years.
Oh, wow.
6% of couples make it over 50 years. And if we're in the 30 to 40-year range, about in the 30s, 30%, even 20 years, about 30% of couples make it over that time period. I think that a couple things have happened. Number one, everybody needs to be independent. You should be
Mm,
independent. Get a job, get a life, get everything together, and then like bloop, plop person into life. So, first of all, that's a problem. Being so independent has led to having singles that are in their late 30s, 40s, 50s and never been married because they were hyper focused on building their life and building their career because we as a society value education, but we
mm,
don't value family as much as we value education. We value independence. What good is independence? You're going to get married anyway. Our whole goal of life is not to
mm,
be independent. We're supposed to be
mm,
involved with a family and community and a world. Independence is like not a. You should learn how to live on your own, function on your own, but independence as a value is very anti family and is very anti community. And it's problematic. And so I think at the core of our world today, we have a lot of values that have seeped in that are not really traditional Jewish values. In traditional Judaism, we value family. We value community. We value helping the world. We think that people are better together, right?
mm,
Independence says I'm better off on my own, but we value people coming together. And so therefore because independence is important, because financial security is important, we
mm,
delay marriage. And so first you have to go to university and then you have to get a job and then you have to have enough money, then you should have enough savings, you should maybe even have a car and a house and a life set up, and then you should go meet your partner, and then you should work a little bit more, and then you should think about having a family. Well, by the time
mm.
you've done all that, you're 47. Like we missed the boat. And the
Right.
other problem is we're really missing generations. So imagine back in the day, right? People got married in their teens or 20s. If you get married in your 20s and you start having children, by the time that you're 40, we have a whole new generation. If you don't get
Mm,
married until 40, and you don't have children until mid 40s, we have literally skipped generations. We are literally not populating the world and
mm,
bringing more people into the world to make it a better place because we focused on independence. We focused on
mm,
doing our own thing, but it's not a Jewish value at all. Community is a Jewish
Mm,
value. Family is a Jewish value. And building a life together and making the world a better place. All of those things are very strong Jewish values. And to me, it's just like I'm frustrated. And I think that we need to bring marriage back in style. It needs to
mm.
be popular. It needs to be the cool thing to do. Like everybody's getting married in their 20s. Woo, you know?
Right.
And then of course if things happen, there should be for later stage if there's divorce or somebody loses a partner, yes, we get remarried also because we believe in marriage. We didn't just get married. Some people have the philosophy get married to have kids. Okay, but
Mm,
nobody nobody ages out of love. Like
right.
you think at 50 if somebody lost their spouse they don't want love, of course they do.
Mhm,
So maybe they're not having children but they still should have a family. They still should be able to come together and build a life with somebody and to be able to integrate. It's such a gorgeous thing. It it's so much more valuable than independence. It's so much more valuable than money. They say that having a life partner will increase your lifespan, right? You want to have a longer life
mhm.
and a healthier life if you have a life partner. You have a better chance of living a longer, healthier life than if you're doing it on your own. Fantastic. I like those stats. I like that data. Like, that's
Right.
great news. Like, why aren't we rushing to find a partner? We should be.
You're making it sound so amazing. You're just so full of
So
full of that
enticing.
energy. Yeah, so enticing. But let me do some pushback on that. I mean, you're talking about independence, which is, I hear your point. But on the other hand, people will say you can't marry to make, you can't find your own happiness in the other person. You can't expect that person to make you complete. What do you say about that?
I agree. I think that you should find your own happiness and your own joy. Nobody's going to make you happy. You're the only one that
Mm,
can make you happy.
mm,
And you can build together. And the greatest way to build love is by giving. So
mm,
as we if we have somebody to regularly give to and we have a partner and we have a family and we have a community, we are more likely to feel love. If we're more likely to feel love,
mm.
then we're more likely to feel happy. But no, I'm not counting on anybody for my happiness. I have to make my own happiness, but I can't make my own partnership, right? Like I can't
Right.
make my own marriage. Like I can't. I think there is a concept in the world of like marrying yourself, but it's not a
I
Jewish
saw that
concept at
years
all.
ago. Oh, it's so strange. Yeah.
You're right. It's not a
People
Jewish
were
concept.
were making, like, their own marriages to themselves because they weren't getting married, so they were marrying themselves and making their ceremonies for that. Yeah.
So I feel like there is that first marriage to yourself, but it's like body and soul, right? It's the
Mhm,
spiritual side of
mhm,
us when the soul comes into our body. That's the first meet, and that's the first
mhm,
soulmate, right? And then we have our person in this world that we get married to, right? And that's
mhm,
our really our second soulmate, right? We're our first
mhm.
soulmate, mating the body and soul, and our second soulmate is meeting that person and choosing to build a life together with them.
I like that. That's really nice. I really like that. So, after you were on Netflix and millions of people saw how you view Jewish marriage, did you see it made an impact? Did you see these concepts have made an impact, and how have you seen the impact?
I'm so grateful. It was a huge impact. It like when you talk about it, I'm like, yeah, millions of people did see it and millions of
Yeah,
people made the change.
absolutely.
I've had people call me. I had a woman who was in her 70s who would call me and she's like, Eliza, I wasn't going to keep dating him, but I heard you date him till you hate him. And
Yeah.
I didn't like him I mean, he was okay, but she's like, but I kept dating him and he's wonderful. We're together for 6 months now. And I would have dumped him after date one if not for you. So
Wow.
so I've got messages like that. I've had other people just randomly stop me in New York City, in the airport, and they're like, "I loved your show. It was so beautiful. I learned so much about marriage, about relationships, about dating. I learned so much about Judaism." And a lot of people were really grateful that what they saw was through me at least was somebody who was not judgmental, meaning you are who you
Mm,
are. Good, let's find a partner who matches you. Secular,
mm,
religious, traditional, younger, older, we don't care. You could get
right.
married, you could find your person, and you could be who you are. You don't need to change who you are to go find your human being. You can be a great human being wherever you're at, whatever level you're at, whatever you're doing, and go find your partner. And a lot of people said, like, you kind of restored my faith and hope in marriage and in finding a partner. And I almost gave up, but I'm going to try again because you also gave us some tips and tools of what to do. And now I'm going to try to do those things. And I was like, yes, like,
Wow.
yay.
That's
So
incredible.
there's been
That's
a lot
really
of,
incredible.
yeah, a lot of support, a lot of support.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think you also really showed what a Jewish woman is on there. I mean, you always are with a wig cover with your wig covering your
This is
hair,
my wig.
your wig. You dress modestly.
Yeah.
Did you have people who didn't know things about you as a Jewish woman? Did you break some stereotypes
I
in
think
just being
I
who you are?
I think so. I think first of all, being a positive, happy, upbeat, non-judgmental
Yes,
human, like orthodox but non-judgy, right? Like it
right,
doesn't like I always tell people, I'm like, I don't care who you are, but I want to know who you are, right? Meaning when I say
right.
I don't care, it means you're free to be who you are. I accept who you are, and I want to know who you are. And also like I am who I am. So don't like I'm not telling you what to do. Don't tell me what to do. We'll just work together to find a match. Um, I I really was very happy to represent Jewish women, Orthodox Jewish women, and Judaism in a positive light, which is how I see it and how I experience it in my life. So everything from, if I had a glass of water, I made a blessing over it before I took a drink, or I walked in a
Wow,
room and there was a mezuzah on the doorpost and I'd give it a kiss or something. Like we made sure to point out to the producers, listen, this is a part of who I am. I don't know if you know this, but like this is a Jewish thing. You can either show it on camera, point it out, call it out, whatever you want. And sometimes they
right.
showed it and sometimes they explained it. And what I
Oh,
found
wow.
fascinating was what they didn't explain. People told me, we had like some non-Jewish people, they called their Jewish friends. What does this mean? What is this thing? And sometimes they knew and sometimes they didn't know. And they're like, forget it. I'm going to ask Google. I'll find out. And then people
Wow.
got curious and they started to look things up. And I think that's the best thing, to spark curiosity and have somebody want to ask a question because you learned something and you want to learn and know something more. I thought that that was
100%.
really fascinating.
That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
so fantastic. What was there anything that surprised you in, in what you did that you didn't expect? I mean, it sounds like you came with a very strong vision of what you wanted to accomplish. Was there anything that you was unexpected to you?
What was unexpected was for my vision to be a reality, right? Like I have
Right.
very high
Wow.
hopes. I want to get it
Right.
right. I want to do it well. I want to personally be fairly represented in film. I film for an hour and a half. You see 5 minutes and you can
Right.
cut and paste anything together, right? So I always give this example. I could be laughing with you, or they could cut it and I could be laughing at you, right? It just,
Right.
there's a nuance
They
of
could
what it
really they could really misrepresent you.
completely. And the
Yeah.
contract that I signed basically says, "You have no control, you have no rights, we can do anything." That's the contract.
Wow. That must
It
have been scary.
it's very scary. It was very scary. I was
Right.
scared for me, for the Jewish people, and for my children's
Right.
matches. And I basically had a conversation with God and I was like, "Listen, you're my partner, you're my boss, right? The contract I'm signing, that's just a contract in this world, but like I work for you and I just want this to be the greatest good and I want it to be good for everybody. I want all the Jewish people of all different backgrounds to be represented fairly." I worked with people on the show, they had never dated anybody Jewish. I was the first one to set them up with somebody Jewish. We also worked with
Wow.
people that were religious, that only dated religious, that we had a hard time getting matches for because it's ridiculous. Why would they go on TV? They never go on TV, right?
Right.
And who would want to
Sure.
date them on TV?
Right.
So it was so incredible. I didn't expect. I'm very grateful and I had high
Mm.
hopes, but I really felt very fairly represented. Like when you see me on the show in Jewish matchmaking and you're like, "Oh, is she really like that?" Yeah, that's me. They nailed it. They nailed it. They got me exactly. Everything from like, like the eyebrow raise and a little a little playful, a little fun, a little engaging. Like it's totally me. They really represented me fairly and I feel very, very, very blessed.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Can I ask you how many children you have?
We have 5 children from ages 11 to 20.
Oh, wow. So they're getting into the matchmaking field or the being match made, being
Well,
match
right.
what would be
So
the what would you call
being
that?
so my youngest who's 11, he is considering to go into the matchmaking field with me. He's got the personality for it. He's got a little bit of like a intuition for it. And our oldest is currently in the IDF and in the army. And he's like, I don't
Wow.
have time for this. But when he does, I'm going to be on it. But
Right.
I think he's going to find somebody on his own through, friends, community. I think I'll call it like community matchmaking. I think that's how a lot of people Many people meet that way. I want to do a study to
Right.
find out like how many people meet through what different sources and when and why and how matches work out. I think it would be very fascinating for people to see that really anybody can be a matchmaker.
Wow, and would you be the matchmaker for your children, or would that be
It's,
a no-no?
and as long as they want me to, with pleasure.
Like, in mentoring them during the dating process? Could a
I mean,
parent do
they
that, or
I mean, they basically know everything. They're like, "I know, I know. I could give the class. I hear you on the calls. Like I hear your podcast. I hear, I read your book. I know, I know, I know."
Right.
Um, look, it's like the shoemaker whose kids have,
Mm.
holes in their shoes. Like, can I really mentor them? I don't know. I'll let you know in a couple years. They're very
Right.
receptive. We have a very beautiful, healthy relationship. I think they value my advice, my wisdom. I'm sure they're going to bring them home so that I could meet them and, give them a
Mhm,
thumbs
right.
up.
Sure.
But I also have a high confidence in their ability to discern who's appropriate for them and to have all the tools that they need because they've been raised with this is all I eat, breathe, and
Right.
sleep.
Right, of course. So, what are your goals now for the future? Tell us what's in store for Aliza.
So I am so I'm transitioning from just, doing matchmaking and Jewish matchmaking to the Jewish matchmaking movement, which is really
Mm,
training the world that anyone can make a match and encouraging everyone to spend their hobby time and some of their free time thinking about their friends, family members, coworkers, and trying to make a match with them. And I want to just go around to all different communities and give people the basic tools so that they can have some confidence and some wisdom and to help people build up the world and make it a better place. So that's number one. And
that's
number two
great.
is I have a book that is coming out, which I'm going to show you, which
Please.
is Matchmaker,
Oh, wow.
Matchmaker, Find Me a Love That Lasts. And some of the things we were talking
And
about as you were
and
mentioning
I
them,
just
I was
wanna
like, it's
say
here.
I
Yeah.
just wanna say I got a little preview of
You
it,
did.
like, online, a PDF, and it's great. It's so interesting. It reads so well. So
Yeah, it's
thank you.
amazing. So, what you were talking about, red flags, we talk about red
Yes.
flags, date them till you hate them, the 5 date challenge, dating anxiety, how to navigate. Like, there's so many things. And it's like all this kind of like the show where there's like a client and you follow them in the story. So, it's my client stories and what I do and whether they listen or they
Mm.
don't listen and how it turns out. And then in the end of every chapter, there's actually like workbook. It's so funny. I have all these pages dog eared, but I want to show you. I'm like, oh, I liked my book. But I have like, workbook pages and tips and tools and all these things that you can take it home. Like this is for you,
Mhm.
and either you can help yourself or you could read it if you want to know how to be a matchmaker. Just read it with matchmaker eyes, and you're like, oh, that's what Elisa thinks, and
Mm.
download that information into your brain, and you can go into the world and start to match people.
That's great, and it's very readable and interesting, so it's like a manual that's hard to read. It's very
Exactly.
digestible.
No, it's
Yeah.
like a story. It almost feels like it's fiction, but it's actually
Yes.
nonfiction.
Right. Where is it available? On
Uh,
Amazon?
yes, Amazon and any
Amazon.
bookseller that you
Any
like to buy
bookstores.
from. Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, Aliza, let's make marriages.
Yes.
Let's make this movement happen. I think with
Amen.
your enthusiasm and your joy and your positivity, if anyone can make it, I have full confidence in you, Aliza.
Thank you. I'll be back and I will confirm that that happened, okay?
Right, exactly, exactly. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today and for teaching us and for being that light to others to really show the world what Jewish marriage is all about and Jewish dating is all about. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, with marriage rates so low and dating so difficult nowadays, I thought that was such an important interview with Eliza Ben Shalom. I thought she gave some great advice and great tips on how to go about dating, who to date, how to find compatibility. Date them till you hate them was a cute, really cute way of saying not to just give up. And the red flags that she spoke about, I thought there was a lot of optimism in her voice and her tone. I love her value of trying to find and create a situation where Jewish marriages just becomes the norm and just becomes what everyone is doing rather than what today is happening, where so few people are actually getting married. So I'd love to hear what you thought about these tips that Eliza gave from the date them till you hate them, for the 5-5-5 rule that you should date 5 times, the no touching rule that she has. What did you think of these tips of hers? And what do you think about the dating scene in general? How are you finding it? And why do you feel that it is so difficult in today's times? And what do you think we can do to overcome it? I'd love to hear in the comments below. If you like getting these interviews, I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. Look us up as well on all podcast platforms. Give us a 5-star rating. We love to hear from you. We love your feedback. And we love the fact that you're watching us. So thank you so much for being part of this extraordinary community.